Okay, so it should be recording, and let's see. It shows up. Okay, so now we can get started. So this is optics for energy. I'm going to. Is that okay for now? So okay, so the class is ACE 5331, 6331. So the difference between undergrads and grads, not much, in my opinion. I think everyone was taking it as about the same level as your senior advanced students or early graduate students. Same thing goes for the other cross-listed sections, MSc, Mechanical Engineering, and so on. So, the most important thing is that this class is very different, like I said before, than most classes you've taken before. Primarily, for many reasons, because my philosophy is not to really have lectures, at least for this class, and have you, there are some lectures obviously, and have you kind of memorize things on set. But my philosophy is really rooted in the fact that you have to work in teams and kind of learn for yourself. And a lot of students may not like that, so I'm just putting it out there. And the reason is, I want to emulate the real world as much as possible. So this class, although it's an optics class, the idea is that to have an experience of working in a small team at a startup, under the pressures and stresses involved with that and what you have to deliver. Of course, it's very difficult to emulate that, but that's kind of the goal at the end of the semester. Okay? Of course, along the way, we have to have some technical, it's an engineering course after all, so we have to have some technical details which wrap around it. So, and I'll come to that in a second. The second thing, so that's the first difference. So this is an engineering class with a very high focus on entrepreneurship and thinking about realistic things, practical things. Okay. Number two is because of my schedule, which turns out to be pretty complicated, much of the lectures, unfortunately, are done remotely, as probably Subhashish mentioned. So, and I will go through the schedule. It's very clearly planned out just because of my schedule. I have to have it really carefully planned out. So some students may not like that, so just let me know. But I'm very responsive in the sense that you can email me. I'll always get back to you pretty fast, I mean, unless I'm traveling. Let's see. And yeah, so those are the two big differences you would, you may encounter compared to other classes. Let's see. And that's my website. Everything will be on the website, and I'll walk you through the website, how to get everything. The only other thing is we will try to mirror everything onto Canvas as well, but treat my website as the primary source. So if there is some discrepancy between them, go to my website. And I'll show you exactly where it is as well. One good thing about Canvas is that you have discussion forums. So when we work in teams, you are actually able to discuss without being in person. So you can do it from home, wherever you are. It doesn't need to be in person. You might be surprised to know that a lot of startup companies, very large startup companies, like, let me think of a good example. The company that runs Atlassian, if anyone knows the name of the company, but if you're a computer engineer, you would know it. I would say 90% or 80% of their team is completely remote. Their headquarters in the Bay Area, but I would say they're all over the world, and they work completely remotely. So this is, I would say, the future of what's kind of what will come, in my opinion. So you need to get comfortable with that as well. And this is an opportunity to kind of experience that. We will use remote tools in Canvas. And if that's not sufficient, most of my lab is on what's called Slack, which you might have heard of. It's a really amazing tool. So I would say that's an option as well. Okay, so with that, let's go to the, so all the slides are available online. You don't need to copy anything if you want, all the PDFs are available, so you can download them. In fact, my goal is to get these available to you before the lectures, but I may not succeed all the time. I'll try my best. This week's are available already, so you can take a look. And I'll show you where it is. So we are in W1450s, 1225 to 145, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Office hours. So office hours are complicated again because of my schedule, so just email me. That's the best way. And I'll get back to you, like I said, pretty quickly. If I'm around, we can meet, certainly. If I'm not around, we can meet remotely or whatever, or I'll respond to you by email or via Slack or Canvas or whatever. Subhashish Dolal is the TA, Vlad. So you can remember his name. And his email, it's not on the website now, but I think it's on Canvas, so you can feel free to reach out to him. So you can reach out to me or him. So we are both available to help you for anything with regard to the class. There is no textbook for the class, as you probably know by now. I'll provide all the materials online, so you can download them. So let me just walk you through how to get everything. So that's my website. So let's just go over here. That's the website. If you type in what I just said, that's where you end up. And if you click on courses right there, the first one is this fall's course. And all the details are here, so you can zoom in. Okay, so you can go through everything, and I'll go through these, but all the schedules here as well. And you will notice, let's say today is August 22nd, the lecture notes are right there. So if you click on it, it'll download the lecture notes. Okay, so you can get them. So I'm going to go back. Pretty simple. And I will try to post some links which are important or relevant to the class right there, so you can just read them. I'll point out what's important, what's maybe not so important. Okay. Any questions?
No, it's just.
That's all right.
Would you recommend printing off the notes, or should we just?
Whatever you want. Save some trees if you print. Double-sided. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Again, my philosophy is not to, like I said, not to memorize anything. I mean, even 3200, I was very clear about that because that's what I said. Everything is open, book, open internet for my exams. It doesn't make too much sense for me because when you go out and work in the real world, that's what you'll face, right? That's my thought about all this. So, by the way, I have some experience, so I am also an entrepreneur. I've started a few spin-off companies, which is why my schedule is a little crazy because I have to deal with some of those things as well. So I have some hands-on experience of what I'm talking about. Okay, so the goal of this class is to essentially apply optics, the science and engineering of light. We'll learn a little bit of science, a little bit of engineering, and you will learn a lot more by yourselves by doing research and working together with teams and with me. And we will apply to, in this particular context, the efficient generation and utilization of energy. And this can mean many, many, many different things, and we'll go through many examples. And it can also be anything that you come up with, for instance, for your team project. So, like I said, I'm very flexible about this. But what do we want to get at the end of the semester? First of all, of course, because this is an engineering class, we want to have some fundamentals of optical design and engineering, and we will kind of dive into it next week. So this is kind of the bread and butter of, at least at a very high level of the technology, let's say. But I'm much more interested in not that. I mean, gaining insight and intuition into that is very important, and that takes time. So, it's not something which comes just by reading a book or, understanding some of the concepts. It's by doing. So you have to do a lot. And you may not get the intuition in a semester. That's because it took me years, and I'm still learning. So it's not something you can gain that way, but at least you can get the foundation laid. So that's my goal with regard to the technical, the fundamentals. But more importantly, what I'm really interested in is what you can do, is apply these fundamentals to solve some real problems. This is what I'm much more interested in for you to get out of this class. At the end of the class, the first, second week of December, I want you to have to look back and kind of think, okay, I've learned something, which I'll probably forget in a few months, but I've kind of used that to solve some problem, or at least tried my hardest to solve a particular problem, or problems, which is important. And that process of doing that is an incredible learning experience, in my opinion. And most students, I've taught this class for a few years, most students agree with that. Not all, so that's what I'm saying. You have to be prepared for the, I would say, strangeness of the class to some extent. That's why I'm giving you lots of warning, I suppose. So this, to me, is the most important thing, number 2 here. And you will see that's reflected in the grade, okay, and how we grade in the class. Apply our knowledge to innovate. create new ideas that are practical, high impact, and commercializable. I chose those words very carefully. First of all, there's innovate, which means that it has to be something new, and it can be crazy. We'll go through it, but think about what doesn't exist in the world today, and what are you passionate about bringing into the world, right? Something new. Second, of course, new for the sake of new is one thing, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for something new that solves an important problem, important to you, and you can define it whatever way you want. Okay, that's I define it as high impact, meaning either it affects a huge number of people, or it affects sufficient people who are willing to pay money for it. Right, so it's like iPhone versus malaria drug, something like that. And of course, both of them are commercializable. So that brings us to the last thing here. And all of these are reflected in the grading. So when you learn engineering, because we're all engineers, we want to build something, we want to solve some problems. The idea is we often forget that we are engineers. And we learn, especially when you're an undergrad, we learn, and also grad school, we learn things for the sake of learning, which is great. But at some point, we have to think about what are we going to do with it. And that bridging the gap is kind of a very, very important and I would say difficult endeavor. Then lastly, we will also talk about some interesting things that are coming over the horizon in terms of energy. So that's something I'm somewhat interested in, so we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so those are learning objectives. So just to summarize, in December, when we look back, I want you to kind of think about those learning objectives. And of course, I'm sure there will be surveys and so on, but that's kind of what I'm hoping you'll get out of it. Now, what are the technical topics of interest? I talked a lot about the process. Specifically, we are interested in these 4 topics, and we'll go into some detail in most of these. Optical design, which is a simple thing to define, is anything that is used to design optics. A simple, very ubiquitous example is the glasses some of us are wearing, right? Or the little camera on your laptop or your phone, or even the LCD on your phone, right? All of these are optical devices because they're controlling light and they're giving some information to you as a human being. There are very interesting areas of research where, in my lab, for instance, we're building cameras for non-human applications, only for artificial intelligence. So these are cameras that you and I would not recognize what it's seeing, but an AI would be able to. So you can think about optics in very, very diverse ways. We will specifically talk about something called non-imaging optics, which are not the ones you use in cameras or your glasses, but which are used to transport energy. And a very, very simple example is simply a solar concentrator. You collect sunlight from a very large area, and you allocate it to a small area. How do you do that very efficiently? Because it's a complicated system. Sun's moving, there's wind, all these kinds of things, right? So it's not a simple thing. That's a good example of a non-imaging optic. We will talk a little bit about imaging optics next week, but later on we will emphasize non-imaging optics. You need to understand the imaging part of optics for the basic laws of geometrical optics in order to understand non-imaging optics. So that's kind of the progression. The second topic, which is a little bit different, but it's important for us to understand because we are our goal is to understand how energy is generated or used, is thermodynamics. So many of us may not have seen thermodynamics except for the mechanical engineers here, except in the first year of engineering, which is what I did. But it turns out optics is and it's surprising, but it turns out optics is a subset of thermodynamics, which is funny things to say. But it turns out to be the case. And it's not that funny if you think about optics as photons. Photons obey statistics. Photon statistics determine the laws of thermodynamics. And as you probably remember or maybe remember from your first year engineering classes, all of thermodynamics is basically statistics, mathematical statistics, which derive certain laws. So for us, of course, we're not interested in deriving these laws. We are interested in understanding what this means for us when we try to generate energy or use energy, right? So in this particular context, we will look at solar thermal systems and what does thermodynamics means, and photovoltaic systems. So that's 2 examples. We will also try to link thermodynamics and constraints imposed by thermodynamics on optical systems. So for instance, a good example of the second law of thermodynamics, which limits optical design, is you cannot do arbitrarily large concentration. What does that mean? It means you cannot take light from an infinitely large area and focus it to a finite area. Okay? Or you cannot take light from, let's say, a meter squared and focus it to a point that is smaller than some limit, smaller than an atom or something. And that limit turns out to be defined by the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, so there are some very interesting analogies which come, not analogies, but connections which come from these different fields, and we'll talk about it. And these are some things which are very exciting because these are new things that are coming in research. In fact, I was at a conference a month ago. I was talking to a colleague at Stanford, and they recently published a paper essentially rewriting one of the fundamental laws of optics based on some new understanding of the second law of thermodynamics. So it's actually very, very interesting and exciting field, which may not be of interest to you, but it's something to kind of think about, especially if you go into this field to work, because things can change drastically. The third topic is also a little bit, I would say, forward-looking. Novel approaches to light management in photovoltaic devices. What does that mean? That means once the light gets into a solar cell, what happens to it? Could we do something to improve the performance of the solar cell once it's inside or very close to the solar cell? And this is, like I said, it's forward-looking, but not so much forward-looking anymore, because I would say the vast majority of solar panels today actually take advantage of these ideas, which have been developed over the last 3-4 decades. So it's old and also pioneering to some extent, because lots of new things coming there. So we'll talk about that. And related to that, we'll also talk about, it turns out the same physics or engineering of collecting light into a solar cell is the exact same engineering which goes into extracting light out of an LED, for instance. So how do you make a light-emitting diode replace, well, this is fluorescent, so this is pretty efficient, but imagine you want to get 90% efficiency in lighting. That would solve a big chunk of the global warming problems, global climate change problems, right? And one of the problems is how you extract the light out of an LED. So these things we'll also talk about, which is related to energy, obviously, but a little bit different than solar. Then we'll talk about some emerging areas of relevant technologies, which I will mention as we go along. Some of this related to some research in my lab, which I'm biased towards, but we'll also mention some other things that are going on. Okay, so that's kind of the technical aspect of the class overview. Grading, which I assume is most important to you, but let me actually, before we jump into this, mention that I'm, and you might have heard this, I'm very flexible about grading. So if you think you did something really bad and there was some reason for it, just send me a note. We can talk. Not that I will always agree to it, but I will definitely talk with you. So feel free to, if you're concerned about things, because I give you a story. Last year, after the midterm, the highest point of the midterm, not to scare you, was less than 50% out of 100. And it was a little surprising for me because it wasn't that hard, I thought. But I'm happy to say that after the end of the semester, I was able to, I think most of the students got pretty good grades. I think the lowest grade was maybe a B, if I remember right, or maybe an A minus. So from that point of view, again, my interest is not to penalize you for not doing well on an exam or something. This is not, in my opinion, it's not important in the scheme of things. It's important for you for your GPA, I understand that, which is why I'm flexible about this. But from my point of view, you need to gain the intuition and the experience at the end of the semester of having done something, built something, right? Something new. And to me, that's much more important than the grade. Okay, now having said that, we have to have grades. This is not a pass-fail class. The grading is very specific, so you can go through this. So first we have a midterm exam, which is about 20% of the grade, 20% exact. And it's scheduled for October 19th. So if you have any conflicts, you gotta let me know soon. Again, like I said, the entire thing is planned out very carefully. I'm willing to, again, be flexible about this. Everything else is based on team-based projects. So you can see where I'm putting my emphasis, right? Only 20% on a written exam, which is open book. So again, it's mostly about your conceptual understanding, not just doing some math or whatever. So 80% is based on the team project. So it's very, very important that you are comfortable working in small teams, and we'll talk about that. And how does that break down? We have 3 team presentations. First one is on September 28th, which is 20% each. And the team presentations are typically about 15 minutes, 10 minutes and 5 minutes for questions. And it's, again, it's not a strict rule, something in that order. Yeah, I'll give you very specific instructions for each of those 3 presentations many weeks before, so you'll have plenty of time. And I will also talk about it today. But that's the idea. There should be about 3 to maybe 2 to 4 students per team, roughly. And it depends on how many students are there. And I will probably start assigning teams next week. So that's a good point. If you are interested in not taking the class, or if you're just if you want to just listen and not, that's also fine. Just come and talk to me. Either way, anything is fine. And I'm very flexible. So that's 60%. So 60 plus 20, that's 80%. Then we have 10% for some periodic assignments to show progress towards the team presentation. So what I noticed last year, and the reason this is something new, is that I noticed that the students, because the team presentations are maybe 4 weeks, you don't start working on it until the week before. And that's not good. I mean, it's good to do a little bit every week, I would say. So I'm trying to give you, I have to prepare it, but I haven't done it yet. I'm going to try to give you some goalposts along the way, so you start preparing. And it will be very short reports, like half a page to a page. Again, all of you working together, putting something together. Okay. And you can all the assignments you can email me, right, or on Canvas. Everything. There's no homework folder, locker, or anything like that. So everything's online. You can email me a PDF, or if it's a video, as we'll talk about, just email me, put it on YouTube, and email me a link, whatever. Okay, so that's 10%, so we are 90%. The last 10% is based on a business plan on Canvas, and will be very new. So again, when I was an engineering student, there was nothing like a business plan. I went to MIT, so even though it was a very commercialization-oriented school, we never learned anything about business plans and so on. So I'm trying to kind of incorporate this into the curriculum. So it's something new, although I've been doing it for a few years. It's useful as an engineer, when you go in the real world, to start thinking about how will you take your idea of what you're working on out to the real world. And what does that mean? That means it has to make money. It cannot be subsidized by United Nations or something like that. It has to make money. So that's why I'm pretty insistent that we have to work on this. And we'll, of course, give you some training. And we have guest lecturers from the Technology and Venture Commercialization Office who will help. And we'll have commercialization mentors working with each team. So you will get a lot of help. But, this will be something new, but I think extremely useful to think about. And I will specify very clearly what I mean by that.
So are the teams going to be separated at the 5,000, 6,000 level?
No. If you have specific concerns, you can email me for sure. But my goal for teams, actually, that's a good question. My goal for teams is to have different backgrounds. So in my opinion, and there's a lot of research in this, by the way, it's a very important book. The name slips my mind. Anyway, there was a very important book which studied the dynamics of teams. So there's a whole science behind how teams work. In fact, Google had a very important project about this. They did experiments with many teams and so on. And I'm trying to kind of relate that, but the idea is that you want to have teams with very diverse backgrounds, very different backgrounds, technically, maybe gender, whatever. But the idea is that and of course the teams are small enough and you are all about the same age that you shouldn't feel awkward about, criticizing each other. I mean, I'm a very open person, so you should feel free to criticize me or, talk, shout, whatever. And I would want you to incorporate that philosophy within the teams as well, discuss. And sometimes doing this remotely is easier because you don't need to, if you insult someone. I mean, of course, I wouldn't insult them, but easier remote. But the whole point is to come up with better solutions, right? At the end of the day, you're all pulling on the same boat. We're all rowing the same boat. But having said that, of course, if you like to work with someone, let me know. I think some of you did mention. Can't remember who did. Was it you? Maybe you did. I will try to remember the names. Not there yet. So. And that's so the final presentation is due December 8th, which is the Friday, last Friday of the classes. The last lecture is the 7th. Okay. And I'll tell you exactly what that means. We'll go through. Any questions about grading? For online students, the grading is a little bit different. I'll post it online. So.
So the 8th is the last day of traditional classes? So
I think so.
We're not going to have anything during finals week?
No, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah. Most likely, no. Okay, so then let's look at the schedule. Because like I said, everything is planned out. And it's a tentative schedule because things change a little bit. But typically, I'd like to stick to it because changing things is a little hard for me. Because my schedule gets changed then. Everything's on there. We'll go through it. Keep in mind that many of the lectures will be conducted online, and it's pointed out. And what that means is that the TA will be here, and he will hook up the lecture, and I will video conference him. Not next week. Next week I can't. I'll be in South America, but the week after that I will. Yeah, so basically, but what that means is it's a video conference, so that means I can also answer questions to you, so you can talk and so on, right? But just keep in mind, many of the lectures work that way as well. So it's a little bit different. Keep in mind also the class website will have the most up-to-date announcements and all the information. And so please check here first. So let's just go through the schedule first. And so let's see. So today is the 22nd, so we'll talk about overview of the class, a little bit of the solar cookers. Next Thursday, we'll talk about project topics. So everything is organized by lecture, basically. And the lecture notes are here. Oops, that should be a P. And some extra links are provided, which you can read through. And I will point them out during the lecture and gives you additional information, especially when you do your research, background research. So everything goes by lecture. So the next week, we have essentially introduction to geometrical optics. This will be done by a postdoctoral scientist in my group, Apatil Majumdar, and he's an expert in the optical design, so you actually get to hear from someone who's doing this for his work. And we'll go through many examples here. That will be next week, Tuesday and Thursday. It's a little, it's like compressing an entire class into 2 lectures. So, but it's okay in the sense that we only need to understand the basic ideas and how to apply them. It's not a full class on geometrical optics. These are important classes because I can assure you that there will be questions in the midterm about this. So just to give you heads up. Then we will go into some basics about solar radiation, which will start into some thermodynamics as well. And then, of course, we dive a little bit into basic thermodynamics. And I have some links which go into some detail. And these 2 are both remote classes, September 5th and 7th. And then on the 12th, we'll talk about optical design for recycling, which is a very interesting area and something which you don't hear about, but it's a multi-tens of billions of dollar industry. And optics is applied in a very, very interesting fashion. So I think many of you would like it. So we'll go through that. And then we'll have a tutorial on optical ray tracing. So this is important. Optical design, as you will learn next week, is what you can do with your hand. Okay, solve matrices or something like that, or in MATLAB or something simple like that. But in the real world, no one does that. Because if you open up your iPhone camera, for instance, you will see a stack of not just one lens. So this camera is basically a sensor. There's a bunch of lenses and some IR cut filter or something, and it's just kind of protecting it. These bunch of lenses, there are about 6 or 7. I think the iPhone 7 maybe has 7. I don't remember exactly. But those things are designed, they're very complex shapes. They're not a simple sphere. very complicated, and they're machined using CNC and things like that. But to design those, you cannot design those things by hand. You have to use computer programs, and you use fairly sophisticated computer programs. And this is what I mean by optical ray tracing software. Okay. So one nice thing about this class is that you will get access, I think, for 1 year for one of the very expensive ray tracing software because you're a student. I'll post all the details there, and we'll have a tutorial from, again, another postdoc who actually uses this in a pretty heavy manner, that you can see how to use it. So the idea here is that you can use it, try to use it for your projects. So let's say you design an interesting solar concentrator, so which is different. You can say, actually go ahead and simulate it. It can be complicated. And I'll talk about it. You don't need to do it. Again, like I said, I'm flexible, but I would recommend it because it will learn much more. Right? Okay, so that's that. Then September 19th, we'll talk about non-imaging optics, as I mentioned before, and there are two parts to the lecture. September 21st. Then September 26th, we'll talk about radiometry and photometry, which is basically applying non-imaging optics and figure out how to measure different things about sunlight or light in general for lighting. And of course, lighting is a very important part of the energy landscape, as I mentioned before. So we'll talk a bunch about that. And then that's where your first presentation is, which we'll talk about in some detail. But the idea is to do a review of your field that you pick for your project and some innovation presentations. I'll talk about what that means. Then in October, we will go into anti-reflection coatings, and we'll have a review for the midterm on the 5th of October, okay, which is kind of covering everything. So you can see up to then is what we will have in the midterm. Okay, and then we have fall break, and then I have a blank day here, which we can fill in with things, but at the moment I'm leaving it blank, so you have time to study for your midterm. Because last year, students complained about not having enough time. And then we have the midterm on the 19th. Now, I have some flexibility here, so if you want the review after the fall break, we can do that too. Right now, I left it this way, so if anyone prefers one way or the other, let me know. If enough of you let me know, then I will change it. Then after the midterm, we have review of solar cells, some basic understanding of the semiconductor physics of solar cells, semiconductor engineering. And then we'll talk, and that's by a PhD student in material science engineering who actually makes solar cells, so you get to hear from the horse's mouth, in a sense. Then we'll talk about statistical ray optics. This is what I mentioned before. This is the idea of how thermodynamics affects the performance of solar cells, in the sense that can you do something to the solar cell to extract more energy out of the light that it enters the solar cell? And that's actually done in almost all solar cells today. So just understanding the basics of that. This is based on some research from Berkeley. Then we'll start doing the commercialization work. So end of October, Halloween, we'll have a talk from the Technology Venture Commercialization Office, Nathan Chetrin. I've known Nathan for many years. He's really good. He's one of the program managers at the Technology Venture Commercialization Office. He does everything from identifying an innovation from, say, one of you. It happens, right? And helping them take it to a company, get funding and products and things. So he kind of knows the whole thing. So we'll get a nice overview of that. Then November 2nd, there's no class. Give you some time to work on your presentation too. Then November 7th, we'll work on the business model canvas. You don't need to worry about what it is. If you're interested, you can look through the links. But it is based on a book called The Lean Startup. So some of you might have read it. But it gives you a methodology to think about how to take an innovation into the real world. And I found it really powerful, and we'll actually do that exercise in class. That's the idea, as teams. And that was one of the submissions for your final project as well. Then November 9th is your second presentation, which is essentially talking about build-out and analysis, and I'll talk about what this is. But on the surface, what I'm expecting here is some careful analysis and simulations, using the ray tracing or whatever, of your innovation, whatever new that you've thought about. And that might sound crazy, but trust me, you will get there. It could also be a prototype. So in several years, students actually built prototypes. In fact, I recall a couple of years ago, one of my favorite ones was someone built a very cheap Arduino-based microcontroller where he had a camera and he had some code which recognized what kind of plastic was being recycled. And the Arduino, so for instance, you had a little Coke bottle, and you had a camera looking at it, and the Coke bottle, it recognized that, the plastics go from 1 to 6 and so on. So it recognized that it's number 3, let's say, and the Arduino controlled a motor which flipped the bottle into one of the containers. So he was trying to separate the different kinds of plastics, which turns out to be a very important problem. And could you do that in a scalable and cheap manner? So that's a good example. Of course, you don't need to do it, so don't worry about it. But I would say you can, and I would encourage you. If you are a maker, hands-on person, this is a great opportunity. Do something cool. In November, then we'll talk about light trapping for photovoltaics and light extraction for LEDs, which I mentioned already. And then finally, we'll talk about measurement photovoltaics, which basically means how do you characterize solar cells. Then we have Thanksgiving break, and we'll talk about spectrum splitting, some new things coming in the future based on some research from my lab about how we can improve the efficiency of solar cells, which is a very, very important and high impact project. November 30th, again, I have a free day here, so you can work on your final assignments. And last lecture is on luminescent concentrators. Again, something looking forward, some new technologies coming in the horizon. And December 7th is the final presentation, which will be on the business plan and commercialization. And the final assignment is to December 8th. Okay, any questions on the schedule? It's tentative. Things can change, but mostly I try to follow this. So you can plan your holidays or whatever around it too, if you want. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about projects. So the idea, like I said, 80% of the grade is based on team projects. The projects are essentially based on teams, and the teams are assigned by me. My hope is to assign them next week. But it depends a little bit on whether people respond and so on. So I'm also traveling with you, so we'll see. But that's the idea. I want to give you as much time as possible. That's my hope. So what are project topics? Before I give you some possible ideas, let me emphasize my preferred project topic is something that you and your teammates come up with together. Okay, so let me put that up front. Of course, if you cannot come up with something, I can suggest something. There are enough problems in the world that you can try to solve. Right? But my preference is that you come up with it, which will be even more interesting because then you're motivated. Right? It's something that you're passionate about. So think a little bit about this. I'll give you things to think about. So what I'm pointing out here are things for you to think about, which I think are important and interesting problems. So before we go to the problems, what are we trying to do? We want to try to address a problem, right? Something that exists today in the world that you want to try to solve, right? At least on paper, because this class, we probably won't get to actually solving it. But we want to think about not just the technical aspect, which is what we will, of course, focus on, but things that we don't typically think about as engineers, right? Cost. Could we make it as cheap as possible? Which we may not think about, right, when we are doing our senior project and so on. But maybe you do, I suppose. But the second thing is durability. Maybe you need to deploy this in Asia or in Africa or something. How will it stand up to the weather, the humidity, the rain? And so these kinds of things. We need to start thinking about the materials. How do you package it, right? How do you ship it? Lots and lots of things around us. And as technologists, this is important, right? If you had a solar concentrator that worked beautifully, right, and it was incredibly cheap, but it was too big, and the shipping costs the same amount as the material itself, it might be a problem, right? So these things you have to, as an innovator, have to start thinking about early on. And that's my goal here. I want you to start thinking about this as engineers, right? And a lot of common sense at the end of the day. Storage, space requirements, do we need to use this in Manhattan where there's no room, or can we use it in the desert in Nevada, it's plenty of room in Utah. Cultural factors, you will see quite a bit of cultural factors affecting lots of technologies deployed by NGOs in many parts of the world. A good example would be, we'll talk a little bit about this in solar cookers. If you built a fantastic high-efficiency solar cooker, but it just cooks at a temperature which you are not used to. Say you are a tribe in Africa and you are used to cooking something for 8 hours under a very moderate temperature or something, but now you can cook something really, really fast, but at a much higher temperature. It just tastes different, and people just don't like it. And this has happened over and over and over again. Something we don't think about as engineers, right? I mean, I wouldn't have thought of it. I want you to start thinking about things like that too, in addition to everything else. Ease of use, of course, that's obvious, and then climate conditions and so on. Maybe you want to deploy something in the Arctic. So how do you deal with the cold, the wind, and so on? Okay, so what are possible topics? Again, just a simple list here that I put together. Solar cookers, these things are pretty common. There might be interesting applications in outdoors, hiking, so things like that, or disaster relief, things like that. Solar water pasteurization, we'll talk about what that means. Water desalination, to me that's kind of a huge, one of the biggest problems that we will face in the next couple of decades. I would say majority of the humans, if you ask them what problem will you face in 20 years, I would say it's availability of water. So that's why I've kind of emphasized water there. Solar refrigeration, of course, is quite important because refrigeration is one of the key drivers of energy consumption, as we all know, living in Utah. Day lighting, so lighting, I would say 1/3 of the energy is spent in the world today is for lighting buildings and refrigeration, if I remember right. So it's a combination. So it's a pretty big problem. So daylighting refers to the idea that instead of having these lights, could we take sunlight, super bright outside, pipe it in here, just like we are piping in electricity. Could we do that efficiently? You'll be surprised to know there are companies trying to do this. In fact, there are installations out there today. Okay? So it's a very, very exciting field now. And you can, and there are many ways to do it. Maybe one of the teams will study it. Solar water heating. Solar water heating is, of course, very, very common now. I would say China is probably the biggest user of solar water heaters. Germany, if you've ever been to Germany, you'll see this all over the place. The black panels on the roofs. Of course, and photovoltaics. And then others, whatever you can come up with. And it can be very, very different. The only thing I insist is that there's some optics in it. And the optics can be minimal. So it could be like a good analogy that I like to think about is Uber. What is Uber? Is it a taxi company? People would say it's a taxi company, but they don't own any cars. Right? So you can have a solution to a problem without actually doing any optics or having a minimal involvement of optics. So I'm very flexible from that point of view. I don't know if that analogy makes sense, but so I'm not strict about these things. So if you have some interesting idea, feel free to propose it, convince your teammates that it's important and it's interesting, and work on it. And it can be a very hard idea, so don't try to do the simplest thing possible because that is not so interesting, exciting. Any questions? No? Okay. And it's a pretty small class here, so you should feel free to discuss and you can ask questions and so on. And you will see as we go along, I like to have a conversation with you rather than me just telling you. Right? It's not that interesting. Okay, so the project presentations. So what are these? So just a brief overview now. I'll give you more details, and I'll put some notes in the lecture notes as we go along. So I'll give you very specific details as much as I can. So first, on September 28th, the idea is to, once you pick a project topic, which hopefully is next week or maybe the week after, you start working on a literature review. In other words, let's say we pick water desalination. So the first thing we want to understand is, if I was in your team, is we want to understand what's out there. What are the solutions that exist today? And kind of make a table, right? Okay, this is what they do. These are the problems. These are the advantages. and then brainstorm. Okay, these problems, we identify them. Could we try to solve any of these? Then maybe we'll say, oh no, we can't. Then is there anything else that we can do? So that's the sort of review, and that takes some time. And since you will have 2 or 4 students in your team, you can divide the job up. And you have to divide this up, and it has to be done within yourself because it's very important that you work as a team, is what I'm saying. Your grades depend on it. And of course, if there are any problems, if someone's not pulling their own weight, you can just tell me, right? You can talk to me. So I'm very open, like I said. Email me or message me on Slack or whatever. So the idea here is, okay, discuss pros, cons, comparisons, overview of existing technologies. Then you need to, so this has to be done early on. So we have 4 weeks or so. So first 2 weeks we'll be doing that. The last 2 weeks, working on how will you solve that problem? What is your innovation? What are you bringing new to the world? Okay, to solve a particular problem. And that's not an easy thing, I can assure you, right? And I know you don't think it's easy. But sometimes it's easy, it's obvious, but sometimes it's not easy. But this is the moment where you have the freedom to make mistakes, right? You can go crazy, come up with crazy ideas, do a crazy brainstorming sessions, come up with, so you need to go through a brainstorming exercise, and I'll help you with this, where you try to take risks and come up with a list of crazy ideas. Then you have to try to narrow them down into 1 or 2 or 3 that you think is realistic. And that's the idea for September 28th. Okay. It's quite a bit of work. Not homework, but quite a bit of thinking on your part and on your team's part. And doing some background reading. Okay, the second presentation is going into some detail of your idea. This is what I said before, which could mean doing several things. Doing analysis of the optical system by hand, by software. Doing some thermodynamic analysis. So, okay, I need to put in this much energy to desalinate this much water, which can serve this many people, that kind of stuff, right? It can also include, like I said before, building a simple prototype, like I described, which uses simple parts, nothing too fancy. Yeah, all that stuff, November 9th. So, by the way, if you do build a prototype, you're more than welcome to bring it. In fact, I had several teams brought in what they built, and we went outside and tried it out. It was pretty interesting. Or if you cannot bring it, let's just take a video, present it, right? Then December 7th is the business plan and commercialization plan, which we'll talk about next. So, any questions so far? Presentation. 10 to 15 minutes, roughly. But a lot of background work goes into it. And I will, like I said, I will give you some assignments along the way, which helps you move towards that goal. The simple assignments, like, summarize the literature review, or summarize the pros and cons, something like that. Very simple. It's what I've already done. My goal is not to overburden you with bureaucratic stuff, but to make sure that you're moving towards the final goal where we want to be. Okay, so the last presentation is about the business plan and the canvas. So there are very basic aspects to a business plan, which is what I want you to kind of think about. Not yet, but the second half of the class, but just to give you an overview. There's some examples at these links, so you can go through them. We are fortunate to be at the U, where there are lots and lots of resources available to you, so I'm trying to have you take advantage of this. One obvious one is the Lassonde Center, and if you're interested, they have this program called Get Seated, which is here, which is a rolling submission for business plans. Not that you will be ready to submit now, but something to think about them. So if you have time, go over there, there's free pizza, and you can just listen to what people are doing. That's pretty interesting. You can kind of see what kind of innovations that people are working on. Right? It's a very, I would say, very exciting culture here. So, I would, in a sense, it's very risk-taking, at least entrepreneurial. So the rolling submission, if you want to do it, that's optional, of course. Our class deadline is December 8th, which is mandatory. Okay, so what is the final report? So this is what I want to go to. the presentation, I'll give you more information as we go. Final report is very specific. We have an executive summary, just 2 pages. Okay, it talks about these topics, which we will talk about, and you will learn what they mean: opportunity, go-to-market strategy, market and industry analysis, technical product description. I put that in red because, of course, I will emphasize that because we are engineers. We got to make sure that it's nice and strong. Risks, economics, and team. So, just 2 pages. So you divide it up whatever way you want, and you will see lots of examples of these as well. I'll point them out. And as I said before, you will have access to a mentor from the TBC who has a lot of experience dealing with these kinds of things, and you can always meet with them, and you are expected to meet with them. I didn't point out, I'll point out in the schedule. But you can take advantage of this opportunity. Then you also need to produce what I call an elevator pitch, which is less than a 5-minute video. I would say 3 minutes is kind of a good sweet spot. And you can be creative. And there are examples of these videos from previous classes that you can look on my website. I can show you, so you get an idea of what needs to be done. Usually they just upload to YouTube and send me a link. So that's all that is due on December 8th. It can be product demo, elevator pitch, slide presentation, whatever. IP declaration may not be so important, but if you have some interesting intellectual property, that might be useful to list it out. And if you're interested in taking it to be patented, the Technology Venture Commercialization Office can help. It's a useful thing. It's one of the advantages of being at the U, because they actually, if they think your idea is good enough, they will actually pay to patent it, right, which is kind of cool. Then we'll talk about the business canvas, which we'll talk in a class, so don't need to do it now. Each team will be assigned a commercialization mentor. You'll be expected to meet with your mentor. This is outside the class schedules. We have to schedule a meeting with the mentor separately. I expect 1 hour meeting 2 times. And I'll show you on the schedule where it is. So really take advantage of the opportunity to interact with the mentors. And also the meeting can be remote. So I have the video conferencing system, which is just online. It's up here that I now put all the information. It's pretty simple. You can just use a browser and meet with your team, or meet with you can also create your own room. It's actually free. Meet with the TBC. But let me just point out the schedule quickly. So the idea was I actually put it here. Let's see. So mid-November, so I said teams meet with commercialization mentors this week, so that's November 14th, and November 28th, so after Thanksgiving. So these 2 are mandatory. You're welcome to meet more. Okay? And the idea is to help you to put together your final presentation and your final report. Okay. Okay, any questions?
So,
yes.
like when you said during that week, do you have to meet like exactly that week, or can you like earlier?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
As long as you need to.
Anytime your teammates are free, anytime the mentors are free. I don't need to be. I mean, I can be involved, but I don't need to be. Yeah.
All right.
I'd like to be the facilitator. So if there's problems, let me know. But the guys from the TPC and girls, they are actually incredible, because they not only have a lot of experience, but they are willing to spend the time to help us to think about these things. Right? For us, it's new, so they really try to help us. So it's actually, I think it's a great opportunity for engineers to get that experience. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so that was the logistics of the class. So now let's jump into what we want to cover briefly, and it's pretty simple. So it's solar cookers, as we talked about. So let me first make the case for why should we develop technologies for the developing world. First of all, there are huge opportunities out there, right? There are places with very little access to infrastructure, electrical grid roads, but very abundant solar resources. So there is this very interesting situation that there is a huge resource availability and huge need. And if you can come in and bridge that gap, there is potentially a big opportunity there. It's exactly what Uber did, right? There was a huge need. You couldn't hail a cab if you're in the city, and but the cabs were around because everyone was driving a car. They just bridged that. They built a multi-billion-dollar company, right? It's a little bit. I like Uber because it's a very interesting analogy. Not that I approve of their the company policies and so on, but it's an interesting way to think about industries. Biomass resources are very fastly depleting, as you may know. Biomass basically refers to forests and things that people burn, which is the vast majority of human beings cook their food with plants or biomass. That's what it's referred to. The very small percentage, like us, or the elites live in places where you don't use that. And it contributes to CO2 emissions, so it's an important problem to solve. Right? It's a huge impact is possible. 1 out of every 4 people on this planet have no access to electricity. It's something similar for water as well, so we can solve some really big problems. And there are market opportunities to build sustainable technological solutions. So it's an important problem in the sense that if you don't build a sustainable solution, it just dies, right? If it's just based on donations or NGOs and so on. So we really want to think of something sustainable. There are no good examples of it yet, but that's what I'm hoping that we can come up with. Okay, so let's go into some specifics about solar cooking. What does it mean? So let's see if I can play this video.
So what we'd like to do now is discuss a little bit about what solar cooking is and the 3 major types of solar cookers that are used throughout the world.
So this is
solar
obviously from a
cooking
company.
is taking the energy of the sun's rays, concentrating them using reflector panels, which is why you'll see reflectors on almost every solar cooker, and concentrating those rays of the sun onto a pot right inside of the oven, and raising the temperature by the conversion of the sun's rays into heat energy. And usually most solar cookers will have a glass cover, transparent cover, used to trap the heat in so that it'll continue to build on itself and raise the temperature to cooking levels. Boiling temperature is 212 degrees. Anything above that will cook your food, no problem at all. The reason for the reflector panels is because just laying something or setting something out in the sun won't get it quite hot enough. Even though it's a really hot day outside, it still can't get it very hot. So with a box cooker, such as the sun oven here, they use insulation and a oven interior, just like your home oven, to put the food inside and then capture the heat and raise the temperature gradually until you have it as high as anywhere 350 degrees, 400 degrees in some of these. Over here, we have a panel cooker, also uses a reflector system to reflect the rays and concentrate them to a certain point, which is the pot here. And it also uses the greenhouse effect where you trap the heat inside of an enclosed space. This acting as the lid, just like on the sun oven, and it will gradually increase the temperature to where you can boil and cook any type of food that you desire inside here. And the next kind of cooker after the box cooker and the panel cooker would be the parabolic cooker. A little specialized cooker here. It's also known as a concentrator cooker. I'll probably stand in front of it because I might be blacked out with the light there. But the concentrator cooker concentrates the heat into one small point right under here and raises the temperature high enough that you can boil and fry foods. This one works a little bit differently than a panel cooker or a box cooker because it does not trap the heat inside of an enclosed area. The heat is concentrated right onto a small spot. Of course, inside the pan, with the water or the oil or whatever it is you're cooking, the heat will be trapped inside if you use a lid on it. But you can cook without a lid on these. It's not necessary to have it on. In fact, this cup of water that I put on here is already boiling. It's been about 3 minutes, is it? And it's already boiling inside of here. Concentrator cookers are a little more hands-on. You can't leave them. To give you a little idea here about how hot a concentrator cooker can get, or a parabolic as they're called. Took about 3 seconds to get that paper started on fire. Probably about 800 degrees under here. You have to be a little more careful with these. You can't just leave it and go off and leave it unattended like you would with a solar oven or a solar panel cooker. That's what most people like about the solar panel cooker and the solar box cooker, is that you can leave it more unattended and just let it cook all day long. Parabolic, you have to be here on top. Treat it like a stovetop. Gets just as hot. Unless you have a smaller parabolic, then it wouldn't be quite as hot. The larger the parabolic, the hotter it'll get. It's not something that you can let kids just play around with, because you can get burnt with these, and you can also get blinded if you let the reflection hit your eye at the right angle. This is boiling very heavily in here already. To turn it off, just turn it away so the heat spot isn't on the pot anymore. One thing you'll notice about a parabolic cooker too, I'm not using a dark colored pot like you would in a box cooker or a panel cooker. And the reason is because the heat's so intense on here that you don't need that black or dark colored pot to attract the heat and raise the temperature. If you have a heavy duty pot that's black, that's fine, you can use that, there's no problem. Do not use aluminum on these because it gets so hot that you start to scorch and burn right through them. So that's how a parabolic cooker works also. This is the Cantina West solar burner.
So I'll stop there. Let me just reiterate the two things you can think about what he talked about, right? First thing, you would notice the sheer amount of energy, right? And that, maybe it's about a meter. You are boiling water in burning that piece of paper in 3 seconds. That just tells you that there's huge amounts of energy if only you could collect it somehow, right? So just keep that in mind. To me, those are the things that stand out. Number two is immediately you would notice the 3 different types, 3 different optical designs in a sense, but they have their pros and cons, right? Something big, something portable, something small, hooks more evenly, whatever. This is what I mean by the design problem, right? Might seem simple to you, or it did seem simple to me, but there's a lot of interesting engineering that goes behind simple things like this, and that's our goal to think about. And I'll try to present examples as we go along. Okay, so the first thing to think about a solar box cooker is very simple, right? As we saw, basically it has a reflective panel here, an enclosure with a transparent opening on the top, a transparent cover on the top, and then you put your cooking material inside, and the key idea is that you are allowing the visible part of the sunlight to pass through this plastic into the enclosure. But the enclosure is then, you have something black there, so it starts heating up, right? So we know from the first law of thermodynamics, anything that absorbs heat will also emit heat. But of course, it emits heat as a black body at a longer wavelength. And that longer wavelength does not pass through the plastic. So the plastic is opaque to the longer wavelength. Reflects it back. Okay, so that those longer wavelengths that get trapped here, forming the greenhouse effect. And we'll go through this again, but that's the basic idea, right? You come in with the high energy photons, they get absorbed by a black body, they get emitted at low energy photons, which then get trapped into the closure, which builds up the heat. Right? So it becomes this not such a closed system, but where work is being done by the light into the system to build up its temperature. Very simple construction, right? You have a reflector, you have insulation, slow even cooking, safe and easy to use, but it's relatively slow, right? You can build it. In fact, I built this, and you can try it at your home. With my daughter, we built a marshmallow cooker, toaster, let's call it. Very similar to this, with a simple pizza box. It's a very simple idea. It's fun to do simple things, but it also shows some very interesting principles, as we'll come to. The panel cooker that he showed is very similar, except that this is no longer a fixed thing, but it has little panels in it, so it's easy to fold. So that's the big advantage of the system, is that you can ship it very easily. So they're very popular in developing world. And there's typically no inner box, you use whatever you have. reflective panel, simplest and least expensive. But the big challenge is it's unstable in high winds. So if you are out hiking, desert, whatever, and big winds, it's hard to keep it stable, right? So that's a big disadvantage. Doesn't retain heat, especially when it's cloudy, unless you have something insulated in the front. So simple problems, simple systems, relatively simple problems. The parabolic cooker that he talked about is very simple. It's a parabola. We'll talk about parabola a lot in non-imaging optics. Because a parabola, you can actually prove, is the shape, the conic section, that gives you the most efficient focus. And you can actually mathematically prove. It's a very simple proof, actually. We'll go through it. It takes two minutes. But that's why most of these things are parabola. And you will notice all those big radio transmitters are all parabola, right? You have a big, there's a radio wave, so they're huge, right? The radio wavelengths are very large. Here we're talking about visible light, so that's why it's much smaller in meters. In any case, so the light comes in, right, and it gets reflected and then focused to a spot where that part is right there. Now, there are other ways to do this, and we'll talk about this, but there are trade-offs here, and that's an important design requirement. So you can imagine things like, okay, what's the biggest loss here? The loss is because the material may not be reflective enough. It might be 99% reflective, that 1% is the loss, right? So that if you can think about this from a system level perspective, how much energy is going in, how much energy is actually being used to do work. In this case, work being to cook some food. So very high temperatures are possible. It cooks quickly. Needs sun tracking, right? So as you saw in the video, the way to turn it off is to point it away from the sun, so you're not cooking anything. Which means that if you want to cook something over a very long time, you need to track the sun. This is something we will come back to again and again. This is again dictated by the second law of thermodynamics, which makes it very interesting. If you want to concentrate something, and that something is moving, or it's big, that limits how much you can concentrate. In a sense, it's common sense, but it actually comes from the second law of thermodynamics. It's complex and expensive, risk of fires and eye injury. Okay, so I'm going to take this. I like to do this in my class. I'm going to take a minute, 60 seconds. We're going to brainstorm. You're going to first talk to your neighbor. So you introduce yourself. Two of you. In the next 60 seconds, think about maybe 60 to 90, about 2 minutes. Think about the different cookers that you've seen. Think about some way you could make it better. Pick anyone. Go ahead. You can talk. You turn on the light. And it can be very simple. You wanna? I'm gonna come over and ask you guys. Or you guys can talk. That's fine.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about that.
Power. Instead, what you have instead of one big you have a whole bunch of small ones. And so for shipping, you just have a setup on it's like structure that allows you to set dishes so that way it focuses. Yeah, what I'm just saying is that their shape is designed to raise up the 3-4 feet into the air, whereas that one's pretty much right at the peak of the edge. So this one is designed to go up to 3 feet. You just have smaller dishes, and when you're done, you stack all the dishes together, you fold it up, and there you go, you just have a rod and some dishes.
Yes, that's a good point. That's important. We talked about that for a while.
Yeah, it has that power. And if you were at least brought ankles too, it would
Because that was the limit.
but
Because you just like to say
so that would be a portable, powerful.
I'd say that's one of the biggest
Make it small. Basically, you're not really small. You make it
like this, you got here,
and just get the same concentration power that the shape has. Because yes, it would still be heavy, way more small. This would be carried.
Maybe because they want to,
if you wanted to lower.
Lots of
That's what I'm saying, so shallow, so it's like here,
Yeah, just send it out.
It might be, I don't know your next hour, it's better words, I don't know how thickness of
Do that.
this and this. Either way.
Probably, but yeah, all of them are just cumbersome to deal with. Even the one with the parabolic cooker, I have that was cumbersome to deal with these small frame hooks. It is a big thing about the injuries. It's like, you just put it to the side, it's like, right there. Or the other option is blocking light. Like, yeah, just put a cover at least so it doesn't reflect into your eyes, but the more cover, which is fixed cover, you get the more acceptable.
So our idea is to have glass boxes with things on. And so within each consecutive box, but if you wanted to make it slower, you were less off, you're away from the glass.
And then you just have it pull it down.
I mean, you guys are a lot smarter than me.
More because it's
You
heavier.
have much better solutions than I would have. Anything interesting you want to share?
But instead of,
I just don't like the
Things you
block.
could set up, it's all in fact.
This is really ugly and cumbersome.
Yeah, to track it.
So what are you gonna fix?
You have to, yeah, you do the calculation to figure out how to move it and so on. That's good. That's one of the most important problems.
Thermometer to each box.
Very difficult.
Yeah, it just tells you, the little stickers, tells you
This one, it's
if you want it higher. So depending on
other
the
one,
just
towards like Via's cumbersome is taking the temperature that you want, essentially.
Maybe we can.
Oh, you automatically detect something and it does that.
If there is a novel something.
Yeah. So it's a PIC, so basically a feedback loop.
Yes,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I agree.
Cohen.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Let me just point out two pretty beautiful things. I mean, lots of really great ideas. But one, you guys are talking about thinking about this parabola, which I've never heard before, and I don't know why, as an umbrella. That's a cool idea. Great. I mean, it didn't occur to me, but glad. I'm very impressed. The amount of thinking you guys just did in the few minutes, and you guys back there were talking about folding it like a Japanese fan, but in a cone. So you can imagine something very similar. You're trying to solve the same problem, but you can work through different ideas, right? And of course, this also involves optics and mechanics and materials and so on, but really practical, I think. Anyway, I like it. This is great. So let's keep going. Whoop, we're almost out of time. I know. That's okay. We have a few more minutes. So I should also point out a couple more things. Just like the parabolic cooker, we can think of what's called a Fresnel lens cooker. Now, the parabolic cooker, one of the problems is that it's bulky, volume-wise, right, which you guys are trying to solve. One way you can solve it is use what's called a Fresnel lens, which is essentially a piece of plastic, which is flat. It looks like this. Let me see if I can. I won't play the whole thing.
Imagine throwing this out when you can use it to make one of these, and then use that to do this, and cook food like this.
So anyway, Fresnel lenses are used in TVs. So
I was walking along the street one day and I saw this abandoned rear projection TV. Luckily the bottom panel was missing, and looking up inside I saw a nice mirror that looked like aluminum coated mylar. Perfect for a parabolic solar cooker. So I returned later with a screwdriver and a star-shaped head and opened it up. Inside I found a removable mirror, but to my delight I also found this 2-foot by 4-foot Fresnel lens, which I could use for a Fresnel lens solar cooker. A week or so later and I built it. Okay, so here's the finished Fresnel solar cooker.
yes, I won't play the whole thing, but it's cooking something good. Anyway, the videos are also available, so you can look online. It's kind of funny, some of this. Anyway, so the idea is that this is flat as opposed to being curved, right? So it has some advantages for shipping and things like that. And potentially it can be very cheap because the way they make these Fresnel lenses, by the way, the most common use of the Fresnel lenses used to be the overhead projectors. I don't know if you ever saw in your high school or something. You guys are probably young, but they had these Fresnel lenses with basically a piece of plexiglass with stamped these circular rings on them. I used to have one, but lost the one I have. But anyway, the idea is that they can be used to focus light. They basically suffer from the same problems as the other parabolic cookers. So it gets very high temperatures, cooks very quickly, of course needs sun tracking, more complex and expensive. Although I would say it's less complex in the parabolic. The risk of fire is an injury. So, okay. So what are the key things to think about? Maybe I'll do this on Thursday. You're almost out of time. Because I don't want to rush through this. It's important to kind of understand the heat principle. So I'll stop here first and ask if there are any questions. I'll be around if you want to come up and ask questions or say anything. But let me stop the recording first.